March 6, 1943, was a day that would forever mark the transformation of the U.S. Second Corps in North Africa. Major General George S. Patton, Jr. entered the main room of the 2nd U.S. Corps headquarters with a presence so commanding that the air seemed to shift the moment he crossed the threshold. Officers scuttled nervously across the hallways, aware that they were about to encounter a man who did not tolerate incompetence. A quiet tension hung in the building, thick with the unease of a command struggling under the weight of recent failure. Just days earlier, the American forces had endured their most devastating defeat in North Africa. The catastrophic losses at Kasserine Pass had left the Second Corps demoralized, disorganized, and questioning their own ability to fight. American soldiers, some fresh from Kansas and Ohio, had been pitted against battle-hardened veterans of Rommel's Africa Corps and had crumbled under fire. They had fled, panicked, and surrendered positions with alarming frequency. Equipment was lost, positions abandoned, and the reputation of the American Army tarnished before the eyes of both allies and enemies. Eisenhower, recognizing the severity of the situation, made a decisive move. He relieved Major General Lloyd Fredendall and appointed Patton as the new commander. Patton, at 57, was not a man to mince words or to coddle those who failed. Known throughout the Army for his expertise in armored warfare and his relentless standards of discipline, he had earned a reputation as both a brilliant strategist and an uncompromising taskmaster. His mission was clear: restore order, rebuild morale, and transform a broken corps into an effective fighting force. Patton wasted no time. Within hours of assuming command, he implemented directives that were as severe as they were precise. Every soldier had to be fully equipped, from helmets to boots, with no exceptions. Officers who failed to comply were immediately reprimanded or removed from their positions. One officer, caught without proper footwear, was dismissed on the spot, ending 20 years of service in a single word from Patton. This was not cruelty. It was a methodical imposition of accountability designed to instill discipline across the Corps. Patton's approach was methodical, yet theatrical. He personally inspected the front-line positions, assessing not just the strategic placement of troops, but the competence and readiness of the officers in charge. Those found lacking were removed or reassigned. Over the next 10 days, the Second Corps underwent a metamorphosis. Officers learned quickly that any lapse in readiness could cost them their command, and soldiers began to internalize a renewed sense of professionalism and urgency. This psychological reshaping was as critical as the tactical adjustments Patton enforced. Soldiers who had felt defeated, disorganized, and demoralized began to see themselves as capable fighters. They were taught to attack aggressively, to maneuver swiftly, and to maintain constant coordination with artillery and armor units. Through relentless drills, inspections, and the projection of unshakable confidence, Patton instilled a fighting spirit that began to ripple through the ranks. Night patrols, rapid maneuvers, and close supervision became the new normal. Patton's methods, though harsh, produced results faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within a mere 10 days, the Second Corps had transformed from a demoralized and fractured unit into a disciplined, battle-ready force. Soldiers began to take initiative, officers became accountable, and the Corps as a whole regained the confidence that had been shattered at Kasserine. This transformation was no accident. It was the product of leadership that demanded excellence, punished failure without hesitation, and cultivated a culture of aggressive competence. By March 17, 1943, the Second Corps was ready for action under Patton's strict guidance. When they engaged the enemy at El Guitar, they demonstrated the results of rigorous training, precise leadership, and a restored morale. Artillery barrages were coordinated with armored advances, infantry assaults were methodical and aggressive, and the American forces, once demoralized and disorganized, held their ground against seasoned German troops. This battle, though smaller than Kasserine, became a turning point, not because of sheer numbers, but because of the transformation Patton had enforced through discipline and leadership. Patton's aggressive tactics contrasted sharply with the defensive approaches that had led to prior failures. Soldiers no longer waited for the enemy. They engaged proactively, striking hard and maintaining momentum. Officers who had survived his initial scrutiny now understood the standards expected of them: vigilance, initiative, and accountability. Through these measures, Patton ensured that mistakes would not repeat themselves, that the Corps would not collapse under pressure, and that American forces could regain their footing in the unforgiving desert theater of North Africa. The immediate impact was both tactical and psychological. American soldiers began to fight with a sense of purpose and confidence they had previously lacked. German commanders were surprised by the sudden improvement in American combat effectiveness, observing troops that moved with precision, communicated efficiently, and displayed aggression in their operations. Patton had achieved what many thought impossible. He had taken a broken corps, scarred by humiliation and fear, and molded it into a force capable of taking the fight to the enemy once again. After transforming the Second Corps in those critical first 10 days, Patton knew that discipline alone was not enough. Soldiers could march in line and officers could follow orders, but victory demanded more than obedience. It required initiative, coordination, and the ability to react decisively under fire. Patton began intensively reviewing every division, regiment, and battalion, inspecting frontline positions personally, speaking directly with company commanders, and ensuring that lines of communication were flawless. Every lapse was noted. Every officer who failed to meet his expectations was either reassigned or sent home. His inspections were relentless, unyielding, and highly visible. Patton's presence on the battlefield was unlike any other American commander at the time. He did not remain at headquarters, issuing orders at a safe distance. Instead, he moved to the front lines, often under fire, to observe the tactical realities himself. When he arrived at a battalion position and discovered that the commander had placed his units behind the lines rather than at the forward edge, Patton personally reassigned leadership and made clear that those who failed to lead their men under pressure would not remain in command. His direct approach was shocking to many officers, yet it instilled an immediacy and accountability previously absent in the Second Corps. The psychological transformation was equally profound. American soldiers had come to associate battle with panic and retreat after Kasserine Pass. Patton reversed that mindset by enforcing small victories, emphasizing control over fear, and training soldiers to attack rather than wait. Troops who had fled in the previous engagements were now disciplined to hold positions and respond aggressively. Every successful patrol, every accurate artillery strike, every coordinated tank advance reinforced the belief that the American army could stand toe-to-toe with Rommel's forces. The change was noticeable. Soldiers moved with confidence, engaged the enemy proactively, and relied on teamwork, not blind luck, to survive combat. Patton also redefined tank tactics for the American forces, where before they had operated defensively, in dispersed formations and hesitant maneuvers, Patton emphasized speed, aggressive positioning, and integrated attacks with infantry and artillery. Tanks became instruments of decisive action rather than merely supporting elements. Artillery coordination was restructured so that fire missions could be requested in minutes rather than hours, and infantry and armor were trained to operate in tandem seamlessly. By combining psychological readiness with tactical innovation, Patton created an American corps that could adapt under pressure, react quickly to German maneuvers, and seize the initiative rather than merely respond. By mid-March, the first operational test of Patton's reforms came at El Guetar. The American forces launched an attack designed to test their new capabilities against experienced German units. The assault was methodical, with each element executing its role with precision. Artillery barrages softened enemy positions, armored units advanced in carefully coordinated movements, and infantry followed to secure ground. The results were immediate and dramatic. German panzer divisions met stiff resistance, losing 30 tanks to concentrated anti-tank fire, and counterattacks were repelled decisively. What had been a panicked, disorganized retreat weeks earlier now became a demonstration of tactical competence, aggressive leadership, and soldier confidence. The contrast with Kasserine Pass could not have been starker. Where once American units had crumbled under German fire, now they held ground and advanced with control. Officers who had survived Patton's initial scrutiny demonstrated the effectiveness of rigorous leadership, maintaining their positions under enemy pressure, communicating efficiently, and executing complex maneuvers. Soldiers, once fearful and uncertain, had gained confidence through consistent training, careful planning, and witnessing competent leadership in action. Patton's combination of discipline, psychological reinforcement, and tactical adjustment had produced tangible results in less than 2 weeks. This success also reshaped the organizational culture within the Corps. Officers quickly learned that rank alone did not protect them. Competence, decisiveness, and courage did. Those unable to meet Patton's standards were removed, while capable leaders were promoted and given greater responsibility. This meritocratic approach reinforced a culture of accountability and performance. Soldiers, observing these changes, understood the stakes. Excellence was rewarded, failure had consequences, and every individual mattered in the outcome of operations. Patton's methods were harsh, yet fair in their outcomes. They forced officers and soldiers alike to confront their weaknesses and exceed expectations. By the time of the El Guetar engagement, the Second Corps was transformed, not just physically or tactically, but mentally. Confidence replaced fear, initiative replaced hesitation, and cohesion replaced chaos. The success at El Guetar proved that the American Army, when properly led, could operate effectively in high-pressure environments and against experienced German forces. Moreover, Patton's reforms laid the groundwork for long-term improvements in American operational doctrine. Officers trained under his command became adept at integrating armor, infantry, and artillery. Soldiers understood the importance of readiness, aggression, and initiative. And the Corps developed a culture that emphasized accountability, discipline, and psychological resilience. The lessons learned during this brief but intense period in North Africa would echo through subsequent campaigns in Sicily, Italy, and ultimately across Western Europe. In essence, Patton's leadership was transformational. He turned a defeated, demoralized corps into a cohesive and effective fighting force in a matter of weeks. His methods were unorthodox, demanding, and sometimes brutal. But they were exactly what the American forces needed to survive, adapt, and succeed. By the end of March 1943, the Second Corps was not merely functional, it was confident, aggressive, and ready to take the fight to the enemy. The stage was set for the broader campaigns that would follow, and Patton's influence on the Army's doctrine, leadership culture, and tactical execution would leave an enduring legacy. By late March 1943, the transformation of the Second Corps was undeniable. Soldiers who had only weeks before fled under fire were now disciplined, confident, and capable of executing complex maneuvers. Patton's aggressive approach had not only restored the Corps' combat effectiveness, but it also instilled a sense of pride and purpose in men who had previously doubted themselves. Every officer understood the consequences of failure, yet they were motivated by clear standards and recognition for success. The Corps had become a living example of what rigorous leadership, accountability, and battlefield experience could produce. Patton's focus was not only on discipline and training, but also on preparing the Second Corps for the next major engagements in North Africa. He recognized that German forces, led by Rommel, were not to be underestimated. The Africa Corps was experienced, well-coordinated, and highly aggressive. Any lapse in American coordination could result in catastrophe. Patton's solution was to train soldiers to act aggressively and decisively, even in unfamiliar situations, while maintaining strict communication protocols. He emphasized flexibility within a disciplined framework. Soldiers were expected to seize opportunities while officers ensured strategic coherence. One of the most significant innovations Patton introduced was the integration of intelligence and reconnaissance into battlefield tactics. He insisted that commanders at every level understand enemy movements and terrain before committing forces. Patrols and forward observers were expanded and empowered, ensuring that decisions were informed and timely. Soldiers were trained to report accurately and efficiently, while officers were held accountable for acting on the information provided. This focus on situational awareness allowed the Second Corps to anticipate German maneuvers rather than react to them, a stark contrast to the chaos of Kasserine Pass. Patton's presence on the front lines continued to be both symbolic and practical. He frequently rode with reconnaissance units, visiting forward positions to observe and advise. Officers knew that any lapse could result in immediate reprimand or reassignment, yet this scrutiny built competence rapidly. Soldiers observing Patton's commitment felt a renewed sense of confidence in their leadership. His willingness to endure the same dangers they faced demonstrated that the standards he demanded were achievable and necessary. Morale, previously low, began to recover as the men realized that their success depended on discipline and initiative, not luck or favoritism. The culmination of Patton's reforms was put to the test in the battles around El Guetar and subsequent engagements in Tunisia. The American forces were now capable of executing offensive maneuvers with precision. Tanks advanced in coordinated formations, supported by artillery and infantry in synchronized movements. Soldiers were trained to exploit weaknesses immediately, striking with speed and decisiveness. These tactics, combined with improved communications and leadership accountability, allowed the Americans to counter German attacks effectively. Panzer divisions that once easily overwhelmed inexperienced units were now met with disciplined, aggressive resistance. A critical aspect of Patton's leadership was the psychological dimension. He understood that soldiers' belief in their own capabilities could be as decisive as firepower. To reinforce this, he cultivated a culture of small victories that built confidence steadily. Successful patrols, accurate artillery strikes, and well-coordinated tank movements were celebrated and used as teaching examples. Soldiers learned that their actions had direct consequences on the outcome of engagements, and that mastery of their craft could tilt the balance in battle. The transformation was not instantaneous, but within weeks, the men of the Second Corps were thinking, acting, and fighting differently than they had in February. Patton's methods were controversial. Some officers resented his harshness, viewing it as unnecessary or destructive. Careers were ended not out of malice but due to inability to perform under the rigorous standards he set. However, the results were undeniable. A corps that had suffered catastrophic losses at Kasserine Pass was now capable of standing against the best German units in North Africa. The combination of tactical innovation, disciplined leadership, and psychological conditioning had created a force that could endure, adapt, and prevail. By early April, the Corps had achieved a level of operational competence that allowed it to advance strategically rather than merely respond defensively. American units moved with cohesion, coordinated artillery and armor strikes, and executed maneuvers that reflected both planning and initiative. The lessons learned under Patton's leadership were now embedded in the Corps' culture, ensuring that these gains would persist beyond individual battles. The Second Corps had evolved from a demoralized, untested force into a credible, competent, and confident fighting organization. Patton's reforms also influenced his relationships with higher command. Omar Bradley, sent by Eisenhower as a liaison and observer, reported the dramatic improvement in morale, discipline, and combat effectiveness. Eisenhower, trusting Bradley's assessment, allowed Patton full autonomy in implementing his aggressive strategies. This partnership of oversight and tactical freedom ensured that the Second Corps could adapt rapidly without bureaucratic delays, while remaining aligned with broader strategic objectives. The synergy between leadership at different levels contributed to the overall success of American forces in North Africa. Ultimately, Patton's short but intense command of the Second Corps demonstrated the impact that strong leadership could have on an untested army. His methods, harsh, disciplined, and exacting, produced results that reshaped American military doctrine. Soldiers who had doubted themselves were now confident, officers were accountable, and the Corps could fight with competence against the most formidable German units. Patton's ability to combine psychological conditioning with tactical reform ensured that the Second Corps not only survived, but thrived, setting the stage for future operations in Sicily, Italy, and beyond. By mid-April 1943, the Second Corps had fully internalized the lessons Patton imposed during his brief command. Soldiers were disciplined, confident, and aggressive, no longer the hesitant and disorganized troops that had crumbled at Kasserine Pass. Officers had learned that failure to act decisively carried consequences, not as punishment for punishment's sake, but as a vital component of building a competent, combat-ready army. Leadership had become inseparable from accountability, and the culture of the Corps now rewarded initiative, skill, and courage. Patton's impact extended beyond the battlefield. The officers he had removed or reassigned, often resented at the time, were replaced with leaders capable of handling the intense pressures of combat. Those who remained learned quickly that survival and success required adherence to strict standards. The psychological transformation of the Corps was as crucial as the tactical improvements. Men believed in their own capabilities, which directly affected their performance in engagements. This newfound confidence allowed American units to engage German forces effectively, even in situations that had previously led to panic and disorder. The lessons of El Guatar and the subsequent actions in Tunisia shaped the American Army's approach to combat for the remainder of World War II. Patton's insistence on rapid, aggressive action combined with rigorous discipline, became a model for armored and infantry operations. The ability to adapt quickly to battlefield conditions while maintaining cohesion was now ingrained in the Second Corps, and these principles carried over to later campaigns in Sicily, Italy, and ultimately in Western Europe. The soldiers trained under Patton were no longer simply following orders. They were thinking critically, acting decisively, and leading others in high-pressure scenarios. Patton himself was reassigned to prepare the First Armored Corps for the invasion of Sicily, but his influence lingered. Omar Bradley, who had closely observed Patton's methods, ensured that the principles of discipline, aggressive tactics, and accountability continued to guide the Second Corps. The combination of Patton's direct, sometimes brutal leadership and Bradley's strategic oversight created a legacy of effective, confident American forces that would play a decisive role in subsequent operations. The Second Corps, forged in the crucible of Tunisia, became a template for excellence in leadership and combat effectiveness. The psychological and tactical transformation of the Second Corps was starkly evident in the months following Patton's departure. Units that had once faltered under pressure were now capable of standing their ground, exploiting enemy weaknesses, and coordinating complex operations with precision. Tank units maneuvered with confidence, artillery support was timely and accurate, and infantry movements were executed with discipline and purpose. The American forces demonstrated that rigorous training, strong leadership, and accountability could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. In hindsight, the brief period of Patton's command illustrates the profound impact a single leader can have on an army's effectiveness. His methods were controversial and some careers were destroyed in the process, yet the results were undeniable. By instilling discipline, enforcing accountability, and fostering aggressive, confident action, Patton saved the Second Corps from the collapse that had marked Kasserine Pass. He created a culture that empowered soldiers to act decisively while holding officers responsible for the outcomes of their decisions. This combination of psychological conditioning and tactical innovation became a hallmark of American military success throughout World War II. The story of Patton's time with the Second Corps is a lesson in leadership under crisis. It shows that in moments of failure, decisive and uncompromising leadership can restore not only operational effectiveness, but also the confidence and morale of soldiers. The harsh measures Patton employed were designed to instill resilience and competence, transforming a demoralized and inexperienced corps into a force capable of taking the fight to a veteran enemy. In doing so, he left a lasting mark on the United States Army, influencing both doctrine and the approach to leadership in combat. By May 1943, the North African campaign concluded, and American forces had demonstrated they could fight effectively against the Wehrmacht. Soldiers and officers trained under Patton's methods continued to excel in Sicily, Italy, and later in the European theater. His aggressive philosophy and uncompromising standards became embedded in the Army, proving that leadership, discipline, and psychological preparation could turn defeat into victory. Patton's brief but intense command of the Second Corps not only salvaged an army, but reshaped it for the battles that would ultimately decide the outcome of the war. In the end, Patton's legacy in Tunisia was not just the victories achieved, but the transformation of men and officers who had been broken by previous failures. Through fear, discipline, and rigorous standards, he forged a force capable of standing toe-to-toe with the most experienced German units. The lesson was clear. Leadership could make the difference between collapse and triumph, between defeat and an army that could dominate the battlefield.